It said, look like you are recording.
Carol's recording.
Oh, Kara's recording. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, welcome to the first official video version of the Spaces of Opportunity irrigation training. So this is going to be part one of a three-part series that I'm going to be doing, or where Spaces is going to be doing. Um, and it's going to kind of really go into detail eventually into how we do irrigation at spaces, from flood irrigation, from how we order water, all the way to some of the more technical systems like Carol's using, like the drip system, like Bruce's system. And hopefully we can answer as many questions as possible. And ideally, this will be used to train future farmers who are coming in into spaces. So at any time, there's not very many people on this call. But if you have any questions, just stop me and we'll try to get those answered. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Beautiful. Bruce, I'm gonna mute you real quick. Or can you mute yourself? Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. All right. We're gonna get started. Ba, ba, ba. All right. Again, part one. Bruce, you remember these days? This is back in the day. When like Bruce and Hussein and me and Amy would water the entire farm by ourselves. Um, but yeah, part one. Uh, again, it's three-part series. So part one's going to go over the basic layout of the watering system for spaces, what the watering schedule is going to look like throughout the year, and then also on a week-to-week basis. Also, we're going to go over how much water SRP is allotting us, since SRP provides us our agricultural water, and a couple of other things. Part two, which will be here in a couple weeks, we'll go over specifically flood irrigation and the concepts that we use at Spaces, and kind of how to design your plot to get the maximum efficiency as well as the maximum percolation and absorption of that water into the soil for your plants. Then the last part, part three, we're going to go over some of the really specific ones. So like drip, like Bruce's hybrid system. We're going to talk about water tanks. We're going to talk about water pumps. Um, and that one will be more heavy in the math, and probably more heavily with videos as well. But yeah. So just so everyone knows, this is kind of our water ordering process. So uh, us as the managers, as the facilitators and admins of spaces, we typically order the water from SRP. That's the Salt River Project, who provides us with our agricultural water. It comes from the main canal right off of 7th Avenue and Vineyard, and then travels a couple thousand feet all the way down to our farm. As of now, the only people who have access to that account and to have the ability to order water are the land manager, which is me, the lead farmer, the community garden manager, and then I think one or two other board members. So this is our order format. Basically, we either call on the phone or we can actually do it online, which is pretty cool. But we're ordering the head, they call it the head size, um, duration, date, time window. Head size is measured in miners inches. So for example, it can go anywhere from like 1 inch all the way up to, I think we've ordered like 80 inches before. That refers to the volume of how much water is coming through, and then obviously duration in hours. Uh, we can specify the date that we want this water to that we are requesting the water to be delivered to, or delivered on, I mean, and then we just give them typically a preferred time to start or a general window. Um, and so we have to order the water by uh we have to get the order in by 1 o'clock or either 1 o'clock p.m. or 12 p.m. but I prefer to do 12 p.m. just to give us a little buffer. And then SRP will make the schedule, and then at 3 p.m. the day before the water's set to be delivered, they will give us a phone call and they'll send us an email notifying us when your water is going to start, how much it is, and then there's usually a contact information for who's like they call them the Zaneros, who's basically going to manage that water for that day. A couple things to know. For the farmers, if you have any changes, like if you can't make it that day, or you need to schedule it later, or you even want to switch days or something like that, the deadline for Spaces farmers to make any changes or requests for water is going to be 10 a.m. the day before. So, for example, today's Friday. If you wanted to order water for Saturday, the deadline to request that to either myself or the lead farmer or the community garden manager would have been 10 a.m. today. Otherwise, the cutoff, and there's a cutoff, and then they'll basically just not allow us to order water. Another thing is that the start time is not guaranteed, so we can request it for, let's say, 6 a.m. to start. Most of the time, SRP is pretty good at sticking to that time. However, depending on, because they have to move, there's Zanjeros, the people who manage their water on the city scale, have to move the water from canal to canal to canal. You've probably seen them around town, those big canals. So they're literally directing the water to specific laterals and gates. So sometimes they can't get it at that time, just depending on how their schedule is. Or sometimes we don't get it at all. Or sometimes we'll order at 6 and they will schedule it. If we order at 6 a.m., there's been times where it's been scheduled for like 12 p.m., sometimes 6 p.m. So it kind of sucks, but most of the time it works out. Some months and some times of the year, like in the summer, water is really competitive. A lot of people are ordering water. So there's not a lot of leeway. So we just got to pretty much take what we can get. But we will be sure to notify you as the farmers the day before, ideally before the end of the business day, what time the main water is going to start, and for the most part, everyone has a pretty much set schedule, so you'll be able to do the math and calculate. If it starts at 6 and I'm like fifth in line, I'm gonna start at this time, if that makes sense. And again, sometimes if it doesn't fit into their schedule, or they can't, if we give them a window like from like 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and they can't schedule it within that, they'll just cancel the order. And the crappy thing is that usually they don't even give us a warning. We just won't get a phone call that day or email, and we'll be like, what the heck? And there's nothing much we can do. That's the system that we have today. But the people who on our side who are ordering the water, we try to order it ahead of time, at least a couple days ahead, so we can have a little leeway, and kind of get ahead on some things. We have the ability to order online up to a month prior. So ideally that's what we're doing. But we also know that people's schedules change, and sometimes we have to make adjustments. So yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the SRP water allotments. Basically, this means how much possible water we as a farm, as an organization, are allowed to order in a given year. And this is based on the amount of acres that we have, right? So our property is approximately 19 acres. So we'll kind of go through this. So you'll see a couple of different types of water, but the first basically block of water that we're allowed to order from is called stored base, and that's 2 acre feet per acre, right? So 38 acre feet. There's about 5 other types of water. So there's stored base, which is the first tier. and it's the cheapest water. There's also another stored one that allows us to have 17.29 acre feet. There's developed water, which is at 1.71, and then pump right water, which is then they bump it back up to 38 acre feet, and then beneficial use, which we rarely ever use, but we might use it this year. We'll see. So one quick thing to note is that for the most part, the stored base, the stored developed are pretty much priced the same. But once we blow through all this water, once we get to pump right, it's much, much more expensive. Like for example, like in 2025, the price for stored base is going to be something like $17 or something like that per acre foot. And then, but once we get to the pump right, it jumps up to $60 per acre foot. And I don't know what the pricing is for beneficial use off the top of my head. Let's see if I can look at it. Beneficial use. Oh, beneficial use is also $60 per acre foot. So keep in mind, we try our hardest to conserve as much water as possible every year, but we always get into that pump right water. And it is what it is, especially for this size of a project. A couple things to mention are, let's see, sorry, I got this window over here. So just a look back at from 2022 to this year, we can see how much water we use. We use about 95 out of that. So if we get a total of 100.7 acre feet total that we can order, that doesn't really change from year to year. So you can see in 2022, we used about 95 of that. Last year in 2023, we went down. We did better. We went down to 83. And then to date in 2024, we're at 65.91 acre feet used. And based on that usage, we're kind of on track to go way back up. So we're almost hitting our full allotment. I hope these are just projected numbers. I hope we do less than this. It's going to get cooler, so we're not going to use as much. And then depending on what happens in December, we may or may not be on the dry up. Usually we're on the dry up. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is the weekly schedule right now. So these are the farmers that we currently have at Spaces who are either incubators or they're apprentices. This is broken down by day. Some folks have a little bit more land as far as or more parcels than other folks. Some people's parcels are sized differently, so the hours that they're assigned change. But as of now, this is basically the budget or not the budget, the schedule. And it's also kind of broken down by lateral, and I should have written it on here, but Sunday, typically lateral 2, Monday, typically lateral 1, Tuesday, again, lateral 1, Wednesday, also lateral 1, Thursday, lateral, yeah, it's all lateral 2, Friday, again, lateral 2, Saturday, we're hitting, it changes up. So we go lateral 1 for Jesus, and then goes all the way back to lateral 3 for Angel.
Yeah. Wednesday was lateral 3.
Oh, you're right. You're correct, Bruce. Yeah. Did I say lateral 1?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, my bad. It is lateral 3. But we do it this way just because it takes time to move because I mean we have a whole bunch of space. So it takes a lot of time to move the water. So if we're keeping on the same lateral, we get more bang for our buck. And since we're essentially being charged by the hour, more or less. So we're not wasting time moving it from lateral 3 all the way to lateral 1. And I'll get into those laterals and what they mean here in a little bit. Okay, so um uh This is basically the watering calendar. So you'll see the blue box, the months with the blue boxes are going to be the cooler months. The red boxes are the warmer months. Purple is the what I call transition months. And then December is yellow because sometimes we have the dry up. What the dry up is that every year SRP has to do um, uh, maintenance to their canals. So they typically have to eliminate all the water. So you have to cut off all the water and make the repairs. So more often than not, every year, December, which happens to be the coolest time of year, we don't really get water. We have the ability to order like they call it critical crop water, um, especially if there's a freeze or something like that, or if some crops absolutely need water. But just make sure that when you are creating your crop plans, you are planting according to this, and just keep in mind, especially going from the fall into the winter, keep in mind that December it's going to be tough receiving water. Um, in
Yeah,
the
it's actually November 20th through December 20th generally.
Sure, yeah, and that's a good point. It doesn't always start like the whole month. So it really should be overlapping between November and December. But just for graphics wise, it was easier to do it this way. So the warmer months, we are typically ordering water once a week. And it'll be the same head size. You'll still get your normal time limit of water. And then in the blue boxes for the cooler months, we switch to every other week. Um, and we're going to break down the math of what that looks like as far as how much water you're going to get in a little bit. And then the purple months, I call them transition months because we're slowly transitioning from either cold weather water to hot weather water, and or from hot weather water to cold weather water. So it's sometimes in past years we've gone from like once a week to every 10 days to every 2 weeks. I don't know if we're going to do that this year. We're going to see how that works out because we have a lot more farmers now than we ever have. So that might wreak havoc on people's schedules. Okay, this is the fun part that I'm going to enjoy, but I don't think other people will enjoy. We're going to do some math. So this is a breakdown. This is going to be a breakdown of how much water you're going to get per space, right? So we typically, us as farmers in the past, we know we're getting this many hours of water. This is the head size, but what does that actually mean as far as gallons, as far as inches that are going into the soil of water? And then how does that extend throughout the week, like on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're watering every week or every other week? So um, let's start with a couple numbers. So most folks, especially all the incubators at Spaces, have what we call a quarter acre parcel. It's actually really not a quarter acre parcel. It's a little bit less. I think a quarter acre is like 10,800 or 900 square feet. I think it's 10,890 feet, I think, is what a quarter acre is actually supposed to be. But the way Spaces is set up, you're actually closer to 10,000 square feet, which also equals 1,440,000 square inches. And we convert it to that for a reason you'll see later. So 1 hour at 30 inches, and those are 30 miners inches, which again is a measurement of volume, is equivalent to 20,000 gallons of water. So just try to envision how much water is actually coming out, and you're getting every week. We're going to break this down again. 1 gallon is equal to 231 cubic inches. So that means 20,000 gallons of water equals 4,620,000 cubic inches. And I know this all sounds like nonsense, but I promise it's going to make sense. So we're going to use these numbers to calculate basically how much water you're getting for your parcel for the amount of space that you're getting. So we know we know how much water we're getting, and we know the area, how many square feet we have. So we're going to use that to calculate how deep that water is going to go in theory. So we take 4,620,000 cubic inches of water, and then we divide it by 1,440,000 square inches, and we get a depth of 3.2 inches of water per irrigation. Doesn't sound like a lot, does it? In the next slide, we're going to talk about what that actually means, and we're also going to talk about what crops need as far as their demand of water per day. So if we're going to break that down daily, so if we're watering every 7 days, once a week, in a single irrigation session, so once per week, you're going to get that 321 inches of water per square inch. And that's going to be about a little less than half of inch of water per day if you're gonna siphon it out and divide it up into 7 days. If you're gonna go to 14 days, it's a little bit under a quarter of an inch of water per day. And I know that again, that doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But you'll be surprised how much water plants actually require again per square inch. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is a short list of a couple of different types of plants. I didn't include every single plant because we would have been here forever. But you can use these types of plants and kind of transfer those numbers over. So for example, let's do like a carrot, right? So a carrot requires 0.2 inches of water per day. And that's pretty much across the board as far as root crops, beets, turnips, radishes, pretty similar. Then you have things down here like, hold on, let me move this. Like lettuce, heads of lettuce only actually requires about 0.18 inches of water. It's yeah, significantly less, even though lettuce is pretty much all water. And then you get up to things like, you get up to things like cantaloupe, or other types of melons, which require obviously significantly more water. So we're talking about 0.3, 0.4 inches of water. And you'll notice if you know your planting calendar, some of the things like the spring cantaloupe, onions, let's see, corn, these typically tend to be the warm weather crops, which we know since we're going to once a week anyways, we know we're getting over that 0.4 inches of water. And then the things like lettuce, carrots, broccoli tend to be cooler weather crops. So that's when we're dropping down to that 0.229, I think it was, inches of water, which which will definitely cover the water needs of all these crops. In the next session, we're going to go deeper into irrigation efficiencies. I'm not going to go into that right now, but the different methods of irrigation have different absorption rates, which will affect this number. We can kind of break that down. But for this session, all we need to know is that for the water that we're getting every week per year is more than enough to cover the crops that we currently plant, unless you're planting some sort of crazy crop. And another thing to note is that you'll notice that things like castor beans and Bermuda grass are taking 0.4, 0.35 inches a day, which plays into the need to do weeding. So these crops are, and I love castor beans. Castor beans, don't get me wrong. I think Bermuda grass is the devil, but castor beans, they're competing for not just nutrients but also water. So having these plants in your parcel when you're not intending them to are taking water away from the crops that you have. And in the summer, they can kind of compete a little bit more. Once we hit the winter, they're gonna outcompete any other crops every day of the week. And we all know that they grow way faster than the carrot, way faster than broccoli. So it's just another reason why weeding is so important. Um, yeah, I know you all probably sick and tired of me talking about that, but it's true. So here's a quick schematic, I guess you would say, of the irrigation laterals. I can't take credit for this. Bruce made this, and I just kind of stole it. Um, but so basically, we have the three laterals, right? I should have indicated them, but we have lateral one right here. This is the south side of the property. Lateral two, lateral three. By now, you all know which laterals you're in. Any new farmers coming in, you will be assigned a lateral, and we'll make sure you know. And then, right, so that those are the big pipes. Those are the 10, 12, 8-inch pipes. That's in blue. Then the green pipes are going to be the 4-inch pipes. Almost all those pipes are going to be used to irrigate trees. And then the red pipes are 6-inch line, which at this moment that we're recording this, we don't have many, but by the end of the year, pretty much everything else will be red. So we got funding to finish this all out and make sure folks are getting water more consistently and we're not losing water to evaporation. Um, and then each of these light blue circles are the barrels that we use to distribute water. Um, uh, these are mostly going to be where your gates are going to be included. We'll kind of show the different types of gates that we have. Um, but these are going to be some key points that we're going to talk about here in a little bit of things you need to keep in mind and pay attention to, especially when you're irrigating. And then over here, these green circles are basically the main gates that feed each of these laterals, and they all kind of look different. Okay, so to my knowledge, unless Bruce has anything to add, we have four main gate types of gates and spaces. So we have these waterman valves, which kind of sit horizontally, and you unscrew them, and as you unscrew it, it opens it up, and it allows water to flow out this way instead of straight in one direction. To my knowledge, the only places we have this are either in the food forest or um, in the Nature Explorer area. I think that's the only places that we have them.
That's all I can remember
Yeah.
having any of them.
Then we have a clip valve, also known as a lollipop gate. And I'm pretty sure we only have one of those, which feeds lateral one. Then we have a bunch of these distribution gates. And those are all over the farm. They're also called slide gates. That's the most common gate that we have at spaces. And then we have the more heftier toggle gates, which are mostly used to distribute to some of the parcels and in between laterals. These three gates are pretty much the same. The clip valve, distribution gate, and toggle gate, pretty much the same function. Lollipop gate, I don't like because you can literally just take that lollipop part out and someone could take it, and they have. So we try not to have those around. The distribution gates are pretty easy. You can slide them up and down. They do kind of get stuck if the metal gets kind of damaged at all. And then the toggle gates are the most hefty one. They're the ones with the bars that you twist and you lift. And they also create a better seal. Keep in mind, for example, like a distribution gate, I can get a 6-inch distribution gate for about $37. That same gate in a toggle version is like $140. So that's one reason why we use those instead of the distribution instead of the toggle gates. Okay. All right. I want to get in a little bit to what I call irrigation etiquette, which are basically things that I think all of us who are doing irrigation should keep in mind to be efficient with our water, to be respectful to our lateral mates and our other farmers, and just I think all around a good practice for a farmer in general. So my advice is if you're scheduled for an hour, let's say you have a quarter acre, you're scheduled for an hour, and you're scheduled to start at 8 a.m., my advice is to show up 30 minutes before and also to stay 30 minutes after your run is done. So if you're starting at 8, I'd show up at 7:30 and I'd leave at 9:30, right? Yeah, 9:30. Some of the reasons that why we why I advise that is that you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes someone's having some sort of emergency with water, something's damaged, maybe a gopher hole or something has happened on your plot and you need to repair it. So if you're showing up right when your water is supposed to start and you start opening up that water, you're going to start losing water. And trust me, this has happened many, many times. I've seen it time and time again. So that's, for me, the first rule. Minimum, you show up early before every single session. Number two would be to stay at your plot for your entire runtime. So if you're scheduled for an hour, please try to stay there for an hour. Again, there's so many things that could go wrong. With flood irrigation, there's a little bit less that can go wrong. I mean, you pretty much got blowouts, you got gopher holes. But another thing is that sometimes if you walk away, something might happen upstream. Someone might accidentally close a gate or open a gate, and you might lose water. And if you walk away, and something like that happens, it's very possible you could not be getting your full run. Um, and it's just a good practice, I think, and also it's also a good way to watch your crops and what's getting irrigated and what's not getting irrigated in real time. So just a good practice. Again, watch.
Can I,
Yep.
sorry, I know that there are times that you have to leave just to go do something really quick. If that is the case, usually if you talk to another farmer, they'll help you out.
Sure. Yeah, and
That's-
that's another good point and another reason why we try to keep everyone to the same lateral because your neighbors are going to be watering right before and after you, so they'll usually be around. So yeah, if you do need to step away, just ask someone, hey, keep an eye on my stuff. My advice would not like if you're going somewhere real quick, I'd say 15, 20 minutes tops, maybe across the farm, maybe you got to go to the bathroom or something like that. Just try not to walk all the way to the other side of the farm because if there's an emergency, I've done it before where I've had to run across the whole farm to solve an issue, and it's just not fun and not safe and all these other things. Yeah, there you go. Don't leave until your full turn is over, even to go across the farm. Obviously, if there's an emergency or something like that, there are some exceptions, but just try your hardest not to. It's an hour. It might seem like a lot, but it's not a lot of time, and I don't want anyone to lose any water. Okay, number three.
I got one more thing to add to that is it's always also a good idea to walk back up the lateral after you're starting because a lot of times the person that watered upstream from you might have left a lateral open and you might be irrigating their plot too and wondering why you're not getting all your water you thought you should.
Exactly. And yeah, that's going to be part of there's going to be a slide on troubleshooting. That's part of it too. That it happens all the time, especially with folks who are not familiar with with spaces. It happens with people just kind of going through the farm and they don't understand what are these metal things that slide up and down? It looks fun. Let me pull on a handle. Kids do it all the time. So yeah, it's an awareness of the system that is required, and it's not a hard system to learn. It's pretty intuitive. It's just we just got to pay attention when we're doing it, especially in the summer when that water is really critical. So number three, if you're late or you can't make it to take water when it's your turn, the first thing you should do is notify everyone on your lateral. So Spaces uses the app WhatsApp to communicate, and we have a bunch of different channels. We have one for the whole farm. We also have one for each individual ladder. And it's another reason why we stick to specific days, have specific laterals. So if you're having an issue, it's your duty to make sure everyone else knows. Say, I'm going to be late. I'm not going to make it. I have a leak somewhere. Something's happening, but everyone needs to know because so we can support each other. Yeah, again, you can if you're gonna be late, you can ask one of your neighbors to switch. Like if let's say I was supposed to start at 8 and I know for some reason I wasn't able to get there at 9, and then Carol's after me. I'm gonna hit up Carol and be like, hey Carol, you mind switch with me? You can take 8 o'clock, and then I'll take the 9 o'clock. And I can't guarantee that your lateral mate's gonna agree with that time, but at the very least you can ask. Um, and you can also always talk to either the lead farmer, which right now is Hussein, or the land manager. One thing I do have to mention is that if you have been assigned a specific turn, a specific time, or a specific day, and you are late or you don't make it to that run, we can't guarantee or promise that we can make that up. It's very possible that you'll just lose out on that water. If you're late, you'll just lose out on that portion of water. If you don't make it at all, you just won't get water for the rest of the week. I try my best to work with everybody. And in the past, we've had a little bit of buffer, like a buffer zone and a little bit of forgiveness. Now, because of the amount of water that we're using, we don't really have any leeway. So keep that in mind. Number 4, stick to your run time. And by this, I mean, if you're scheduled an hour, you're scheduled to start at 8 and start at 9. It is your duty to start right at 8 and to end at 9, and not a minute over, and not a minute before 8, and not a minute after 9. Once you're done, you're done. Most of the time, if you run over or something like that, or maybe you have extra water or something like that, most people are cool. But there have been quite a few cases, particularly in the summer, which is what I call the water wars. People are very peculiar about, and they're very exact. They want their water, which is understandable because you want to feed your crops. So just to be respectful to everybody, just stick to your runtime. Unless you have no other choice, then that's when you communicate to everyone on WhatsApp. Go and talk to someone in person. Contact either the land manager or the lead farmer, community garden manager, things like that. And then number 5, once your turn is over, you're done taking water. It would be amazing and really preferred if you could just let whoever's next know, hey, Bruce, I'm done taking water. You're next. Just so they know and they can be ready, because who knows? The next farmer might be working in their plot. They might not be paying attention to the clock. And they might be doing something, and all of a sudden water's starting to come to them. And then they got to scramble. So just a quick text. You can even yell if you're right next to each other. Hey, you're getting water. Carol, you're getting water. I'm sending it to you right now. Yeah, just a little bit of common courtesy, I would call that. And then number 6, if you have trees around your plot, it is your duty to water the trees around your plot. This is written into our farmer's manual, so the farmers or the incubators and the apprentices are both responsible for doing this. Some trees are going to have gates specifically and piping, especially in the future. Some of them are just kind of incorporated into your plots, and it's your duty to make little basins and stuff for them and make sure that these trees are getting water. We get a lot of trees donated. We've had a lot of trees die because they didn't get the proper water that they needed. We want to fix that because we want to have the shade, we want to have the fruits, and then we also want to have the environmental impact of these trees. And also, also importantly, we don't want to waste that donation of a tree. To this day, Spaces hasn't purchased a single tree. We've been donated hundreds and hundreds of trees. At this moment, we have 575 trees on the property in total. So we want to keep that number, and we don't want to go down. We just want to keep going up. Okay, a little bit what I call water physics. Just a couple of rules of thumb, and I'm sure most folks know this intuitively, but just in case you don't. So anytime water is moving through any kind of pipe or even a canal, when it runs uphill, you're going to lose water pressure. And that's the water pressure is how we get the water moving from one end to the other. When water runs downhill, it's the inverse. So you're gaining pressure. And then anytime the water makes a turn or goes through a valve or like a connector or a sprinkler head, you're going to get pressure that's lost. So those are things to keep in mind. Most everyone knows this, but the turning of the water is also it pretty heavily impacts. So if you're doing flood irrigation, or if you're doing drip irrigation, keep in mind anytime that water is not going perfectly straight, it makes a turn, a 90, a 45, you're losing water pressure. So if you can arrange your irrigation systems to make less turns, you're going to be more efficient. You're going to get more water. So we're going to do a quick elevation quiz here. And Bruce, don't chime in because Bruce knows all the answers to this. So we know, so this is spaces. This is the whole property. The top is north, bottom is south. The left side is west and then east, right? So we know in general, from east to west, the property, the elevation drops about 6 feet. Am I correct, Bruce?
Yeah.
6 feet. Okay. And that's a total distance of 1,280 feet, roughly. On the same note, going south to north, we're dropping another 6 feet at 620 feet. And that's because we're on a mountain. So south of us is South Mountain, and it may look like it's flat, but there is an elevation drop. So what does that tell us? Where?
Say north of us is the South Mountain and south of us is the Salt River. It's all flowing that direction.
Yeah. Well, you mean the other way. South of us is South Mountain, north of us
Yeah,
is
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I,
So based on this, and I'm just realizing this now that the answer is just on there. Between the two, between going north and south and versus east and west, which way do you think water is falling faster? Going north or south or east and west? Anybody chime in? Now I'm gonna call on somebody.
I'm I don't know, but I'm seeing that there's a 620-foot distance, but there's a 6-foot drop. So I would say north to south.
You are
yeah, think of
correct.
it as a triangle.
Huh?
Think of it as a triangle. Which one would have the steepest slope?
Think of it as a triangle.
You got a 6 foot by 620 foot triangle, and you got another triangle with 6 foot by 1,280 foot base.
But then doesn't gravity increase the longer the distance? I don't
No,
know.
Yes, but the distance it's the distance changing vertically or yeah, vertically. The distance is not changing. So that
I'm
doesn't
going to say I don't know.
your initial guess was right. So think about the rate of change. So because there's a shorter distance in going north to south, that it's dropping more, it's
Faster.
dropping the same within a shorter amount of distance. So the rate of change of the elevation is greater going south to north than it is going east to west. So with that in mind,
I think Lillian had a question.
oh,
yeah,
really? What's
this
up?
It says she's got a question and I've got an answer for it. If
Okay, is
nobody
it
else.
in the chat? Oh, I have not been looking at the chat. My bad, guys. Um, yeah. So Lillian had a question. What was the reasoning behind arranging plots diagonal instead of having it be square? Okay, so that is it's a really good question. So if everyone can see the map of spaces, the arrangement and the roads were designed according to what was already there. So before spaces looked like this and had all these farm plots, there was a single road that stretched about from where the bathrooms are right now, all the way to that cul-de-sac that used to be open back by the healing garden. So that was the original road that kids used to use to go to
Yeah.
school, to do all these
And
things.
if you look at that road, if you project it across the street, it actually lines up with the entrance to the subdivision on the south side of Vineyard.
Correct. So in order to keep the spirit of the community, Spaces decided to keep that road there and just build off of that. Now, has that turned into sometimes a nightmare for us and our irrigation? Yes, but we're managing it.
But one other little fun fact about it is, I kind of was thinking it'd be easier to work at, do tractor work and whatnot if it was on a square, but in the community garden anyway, I'm finding it's much easier to navigate a 60-degree angle, which is what that actually ends up being, to turn the tractor into the plot than it would be off of a 90-degree, which I have on the
Interesting.
other section there. It's much easier to manage that with the tractor.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know what? I think I agree based on running the tractor. So with that information, because I know we're already past the time that I said we're going to do, but I've been having a good time doing this. So if we have two plots arranged, so we have the lines, imagine the lines are the rows, right? We have some rows going north to south and some going east to west. And we kind of answered this already. Which of the two is flowing faster? Lillian says the left. Everyone agree? I also agree. Now,
Mhm.
Yeah.
does that make it more effective for irrigation?
Nope.
Why not?
Because you want it to have a chance to soak into the ground.
Correct. Yep. So we don't want the water to crawl, but we want this sweet spot where it's flowing, but then it's hanging out. If it's flowing too fast in one direction, what's going to happen is it's going to pool. It's going to tend to pool on typically the north side. And there's some ways we can kind of get around that with doing the snake version that we'll talk about in the next session. But in general, just according to elevation and how the fluid dynamics of water works, in general, the better method is going to be the east to west. We're going to get a more effective percolation of that water, and you're going to have less likelihood of it pooling on the northwest corner and possibly overflowing. So keep all that in mind. Yep, and there you go. Okay, troubleshooting. This happens a lot, and I get a lot of questions on this. So, what do you do if you're supposed to be irrigating and there is low water flow to your plot? So everyone should have a barrel. If you're not getting enough water to that barrel, and you've been doing it for a while, and you know how much water you're supposed to be getting, and it just seems like less. There's a couple things you can do. Number one, you can do what Bruce said, which is go upstream, um, all the way back up and you can check all the gates that are before you. So again, the water comes from the east side and goes west. So you're gonna just start walking east and you're gonna check all those barrels, all those blue barrels. I wish I would have included a picture of the blue barrels in this slideshow, but I didn't. And you're gonna check to make sure all the gates that need to be closed are closed all the way, and all the ones that need to be opened are opened all the way. Um, and that should be the first thing you should check. This is also going to help you someone is siphoning the water without permission, which does happen from time to time. And all we do is remind them that, this is my water time. Like, it's been designated for me. If you're still having issues with them and they're ignoring you, you can always contact one of the space's contact folks. So which would be the lead farmer, which would be the land manager, sometimes the community garden manager. And then we will take action from there because we just want it to be fair for everybody. And like for example, community gardeners don't really pay for water, but the farmers do. So that's a pretty big factor. And it messes up the order and all these things. So yeah, the third thing to do is going to check for clogged pipes, which does happen from time to time. Mostly on the east side of the property, we have 12-inch pipes, but as we go west, it gets smaller and smaller. We go down to 10, and then we go down to 8 on the main laterals. Some main points. Let's see. Some main points to check is wherever the pipe goes under a road that trucks cross. Sometimes trucks, the tractor can drive over it and they can kind of crush that pipe a little bit. And it makes it easier for things like rocks and bags and wood chips and weeds to get stuck in there and they'll kind of clog it up. If that happens and you can't unclog it, just let one of us know and we'll help you. Another point to watch out for is underneath if there's a pipe that goes underneath either a water tank or a shipping container. These things are heavy. These pipes are not infallible, and oftentimes they're a little bit thinner than you would like. So it does over time will crush that pipe and do the same thing. It's a little bit difficult to deal with those situations, but go ahead, Carol.
A suggestion that I would like to add, and it works great for me. I have a pet fish net, one of those larger ones. I carry that with me in my vehicle. And when we get a lot of that debris coming through, I'll go right down into a blue tub or those blue containers.
Yeah.
And get that out. So I find that is super helpful.
Oh, that's a good tip. And you might even get some fish because we have fish in our irrigation system now.
I have done that.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Bruce?
No, I was just going to say one other choke point that I've been noticed once in a while is lateral 3 main gate has
over here.
The grid on it that a lot of times catches a lot of material.
Exactly. Yeah. And then also, so again, if that's another good point. So check for clogs, also check for the gates. Not only do you, if you're downstream, let's say on the west end in lateral 3, let's say you're Abdel, you're gonna want to go keep walking and make sure everything's open and closed as it needs to be, even going all the way back to these main gates to the main canal, and you want to go all the way south because sometimes incomplete laterals will remain open. And so those are some good things to check. So next thing would be if you're noticing slow water movement within your plot. This mostly applies to the folks doing flood irrigation. So one thing would be to check for leaks or blowouts. Maybe a berm around your plot has collapsed and it's leaking water out somewhere and you just don't notice it. Maybe it's covered with weeds or something like that. Or I call those blowouts because it can start out like a really small crack, and then with a lot of water pressure, that crack will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, there's like 3 feet of or maybe not 3 feet, but like 2 feet of open space, and you're just losing tons of water. Another thing you can do is check for blockages like grass or wood chips, weeds that are kind of hindering the water from flowing down your ditches. That happens quite a bit, especially with wood chips and grass. And then the third thing would be check for gopher holes. It's been over time, we've gotten more and more gophers, and I love animals, but they wreak havoc on our irrigation system. And if a gopher hole is open, it will take gallons and gallons, probably 1,000 gallons of water from one area to a complete separate other area of the farm and sometimes even to the neighborhood. And you'll be sitting there thinking, what happened to all my water? Well, it went over into Steve's yard. So yeah, those things to check. Again, here's the map. Um, okay, so what are the best ways to improve the water flow in your plot? Number one, remove the weeds whenever possible. Remember earlier we talked about things specifically like Bermuda grass, which is consuming about what was it, like 0.3, 0.4 inches of water. It's competing, it's sucking up all that water, and they love it and they're really prolific. So a lot of times you got to dig those things out. Most of the time, just cutting it and mowing it is not enough because you might not be able to see it and it might not have weed seeds, but that rhizome, the root system underneath, is still taking up nutrients. Number two is, again, less turns, the better. Obviously, you can't remove all the turns, but if we can use a system like Bruce's system that we're going to talk about in a few weeks, that is pretty much a straight shot right off the irrigation pipe, you're going to get much more water. It's going to flow better, and you're not going to lose as much pressure. Thing number three, some of you might have been through this because I've been through this a lot, which is if you're looking at your plot, you're watching it water, and you're noticing that one section is not getting irrigation. It looks dry. It's the water's just not flowing through that. Normally, what that means is that spot you have a high spot, and that happens. We do our best to grade the area, but it's not a perfect system. And when we're making rows, it often can make high spots again. And the only way to kind of get through this, again, is to sit there and watch your plot, especially for the first, I'd say, 3 to 4 irrigation sessions. So you'll be able to identify which spots are really getting water, which spots are not getting water, and which spots are getting too much water and where it's pooling. So you need to observe those, identify them, mark them out somehow, and then when the area is dry, the best way that I found to do it is literally just to get in there with a hoe or a rake and move that soil around to adjust it. And this is not going to get solved over the first irrigation. You're going to have to do this again over 3, 4, maybe even 5 irrigations to get everything perfect. But yeah, and again, earlier in the season, the better. Last slide, lines of communication. Again, I'm gonna hit this. WhatsApp is probably the fastest way to get in contact with somebody other than calling them on the phone. If there's an absolute emergency, please don't hesitate to call me or Hussein. I don't know if Bruce wants me to include him on this, but definitely me or Hussein. So Hussein will be our lead farmer. He's retiring here in a little bit, so we will have a new lead farmer. I'm the community food systems manager or the land manager, and then the community garden manager also has a role for irrigation, Zenhero. Just also keep in mind, some of us have different days where we're managing the overall water spaces. So Hussein is typically managing the overall water of spaces on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Again, that's the lead farmer position. As of now, the land manager, me, is doing Mondays, and then the community garden manager is doing Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, this might change, but for the most part, if you know which day you are, which lateral you are, you'll know who's managing your water that day. But that concludes our presentation. I hope you all had a great time because I sure did. I sure did.
Yes, this was a very good presentation. I want to tell you thank you very much. I think we need to understand the concept and everything, and this really helped a lot.
Sure. Yeah, and this is the basic stuff. So in a couple of weeks, maybe in a month, depending on what the scheduling looks like, we'll get more into depth on flood irrigation. And then a couple of weeks after that, we're gonna go really into depth on some of the more technical versions like overhead and drip and Bruce's hybrid system. because I know a lot of folks are really, I get questions about this all the time. I can't imagine how many questions Lillian and Carol and Bruce get about all these things. My idea is to get it all in this one video, post it, they can go watch it. And it'll make our lives easier. And then one day Carol will be famous on YouTube.
Ah,
All right. We're a little bit over time, but if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to ask them.
I do have one more question,
Sure.
which is finances for further irrigation. For example, I would love one of, I think it is the 6-inch between Rodney's and mine over to the north plot of mine, Helene's.
Yeah.
Please.
What about it?
Um, just so that the water is a little bit better, we can keep down the weed management. Um, do we have funds for that sometime in the future?
Yes, we already have funds for them. It's just to let you all know where we're at right now, September 27th, 2024. By the end of 2024, pretty much the entire rest of the farm will be piped, other than some of the trees.
So the red lines.
Yeah, the red lines, correct. You are correct. Sorry, let me stop my share. And the thing that's been holding me back at this moment is hiring. So we have to hire, we have the funds for the materials. We have to hire contracts to do the installation. So I can't do them myself according to the grant. So my bottleneck has been finding a good contractor who's comfortable in doing this irrigation work, because it's a little bit of a unique, let's say, system. But I've already identified one contractor. We got everything signed, the checks all sent out. I'm just getting ready to have them start probably within the next couple weeks. And we have to have
That'll
all
be
that,
awesome.
yep. And we have to have all that work done by the end of the year.
Wow, that's gonna be fast.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I apologize for going 8 minutes over. But hopefully that answers a lot of questions for you all as farmers currently, and other farmers in the future. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to message or email or pull one of us aside who are in a staff position, and we should be able to answer some of these questions.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.